3 Feet Under. A novel by Paul Kropp. Scott and Rico find a map to long-lost treasure. There's $250,000 buried in Bolton's mine. But then the school bully steals their map. When he heads for the old mine, the race is on. Chapter 1. Maybe a treasure map. Scott and Rico walked down the alley. Maybe they should have looked around to see where they were. Instead, they talked about what Scott had found in his grandpa's attic. "I found a map," Scott told his friend. "Yeah, a treasure map," Rico said with a laugh. "So what else did you find? Like, were there gold coins? Or maybe some old Wayne Gretzky cards?" "My dad took all the sports cards," Scott said. "But I didn't let him see the map. I thought he'd..." "Just throw it out." He threw out a lot of stuff. Scott had spent the weekend with his dad. They had cleaned up his grandpa's attic. His grandpa had died a month ago. Now the family was sorting out all his junk. For 2 days, Scott and his dad cleaned out a pile of stuff. There were old newspapers, books, and records. There were old clothes, old computers, and old TVs. These were worth nothing. Then there were old hockey and baseball cards, worth a lot. Scott found a map inside a tin box. Mostly, the box was full of stocks and bonds. But at the bottom was a map, a hand-drawn map. He gave the stocks and bonds to his dad. Scott put the map into his pocket. "It might be a treasure map," Scott told his friend. "I'm not sure." "So where is this map?" Rico asked. "In my backpack," Scott replied. "I'll show you at recess." Rico walked up on a curb edge. Of the two, he was the athlete. Rico was on all the school teams. Even though he was short. He had a big smile that all the kids liked, and he was cool, something that Scott would never be. But Scott was smart. He read a book or two each night. His math was so good that the teachers asked him for answers. He could remember stuff for tests. He once learned all the battles of the world or of the War of 1812. Scott could do things like that. The two of them had been friends all their lives. Their dads worked together. Their moms had coffee together. So the two kids had been friends since they were born. They were like brothers, but without the fights. "Is it old?" Rico asked. "What?" "The map, you jerk," Rico said. He didn't believe Scott, but still he wondered. "Yeah, it's on old yellow paper," Scott replied. "You think the map shows Bolton's treasure?" Rico asked. Scott shrugged. "I don't know. It's just an old map with some writing on it. But it shows the way down into the old mine on Mrs. Bolton's farm." Bolton's treasure was famous in their town. 100 years ago, a guy named Bolton robbed a bank and buried all the money. He got caught and went to jail, but died in there. The stolen money stayed buried, but $250,000 in old bills and coins. Lots of people had looked for it, but Bolton's treasure had never been found. People figured that Bolton must have hidden the loot in the old mine. Bolton had been nearby when he was caught. His aunt owned the mine, but the old coal mine spread for miles. It was deep, dark, and wet. There were just too many places where the treasure might have been hidden. People had dug holes and followed tips. Once they had even brought in a bulldozer. Still, the money was never found. "You know what I think?" Scott asked. Rico didn't find out. Before Scott could say another word, they were in trouble. In front of them was a kid named Clay Prentice. He was the biggest, meanest kid in school. Behind them was a bully from grade 7. On one side was Clay's older brother. On the fourth side was a fence. They were trapped. "Time to pay up, boys," Clay told them. A loony each to use this alley." "It's not your alley, Clay," Rico snapped back. "Yeah, but that's what we charge," Clay replied. "Pay up or get hurt. Your choice." So I'm guessing if I go back and it says up here, "Time to pay up, boys," Clay told them, "a loony each to use this alley." I was confused when I read that, but I kept reading and they were talking about that's what they charge, so a loony must be some type of money. The boys had been caught like this before. The last time they paid, but it was only a quarter. This time they didn't even have that much. One guy kept moving up from the back. Clay's brother was moving in from the side. Clay just stood in front and laughed at them. "We don't have any money," Scott told them. "Don't cry," he told himself. "Whatever you do, don't let them see you cry." "Then we get to have some fun," Clay told them. "Get 'em!" he shouted. The 3 bullies jumped on them at the same time. The odds weren't fair, 3 against 2. Clay landed a punch right into Scott's gut. Scott screamed. But Rico kicked. He was faster than these guys. He kicked Clay's brother right where it hurts the most. The guy bent over in pain, and Rico saw a way out. "Run!" he shouted to Scott. But Scott couldn't run. He had 2 guys on him now. Clay was grabbing at his backpack. The older kid was holding his head. Scott was struggling, but he was trapped. So Rico ran back and pulled the one bully off his friend. Then he grabbed his friend's arm and pulled him free. Rip! One strap on Scott's backpack ripped. "My backpack!" Scott yelled. "Let it go!" Rico yelled. Scott pulled his arm free of the backpack and took it off. When they were a block away, they looked back. There were Clay and his gang going through Scott's backpack. "Kiss your lunch goodbye," Rico said. "My lunch is nothing," Scott told him, "but my grandpa's map is in there." Rico just shook his head. "Don't worry. Clay will take your lunch and your money, but he's too stupid to steal a map."